You know, in the margins of one of the greatest novels ever written, there's a woman screaming. She's a mystery, a monster, an obstacle in the hero's path. But what if her story, the one that came before, is even more powerful than the one we think we know? Today, we're going to uncover the untold story of the mad woman in the attic.
Right. If you've ever read Jane Eyre, you know exactly who I'm talking about. She's the terrifying secret that Mr. Rochester has locked away in Thornfield Hall. She's this violent ghost who haunts the hallways and, most importantly, stands in the way of Jane's happiness. And in that original book, she's barely even a person. She has no real voice, no history. She's just Bertha Mason, the mad wife from the colonies. Honestly, she's a plot device, and her only job is to be a problem that has to be overcome. She's defined completely by her so-called madness and her otherness. But, that was the story we were given. It turns out that's not the whole story. Decades later, an author named Jean Rhys just refused to let that be the final word. She decided she was going to go back, all the way back to the beginning, to find the real woman behind the monster. And she did it in her 1966 masterpiece, Wide Sargasso Sea. Now, this book isn't just a prequel. It's like an act of literary justice. It gives a history, a family, and a soul to that voiceless woman. It unlocks the great secret that Jane Eyre only ever hinted at.
So the very first thing Rhys does, and this is so important, is give her back her name. Before she was ever the mad woman known as Bertha, she was Antoinette Cosway. And just by doing that, Rhys restores her humanity. Suddenly, this isn't the story of a monster anymore. It's the tragedy of a woman whose entire identity was stolen from her.
So to understand Antoinette, you have to go back to her childhood in 1830s Jamaica. And this was not some peaceful, idyllic island paradise. It was a society that was literally cracking apart at the seams, right after the British Empire passed the Emancipation Act and ended slavery. Now, Antoinette's whole conflict is rooted in this identity. She's a white Creole. What does that mean? Well, it meant she wasn't accepted by the newly freed black population who saw her family as former slave owners. But at the same time, she was looked down on by the English, who saw her as not quite proper, not truly one of them. She was caught in the middle, belonging absolutely nowhere. Her childhood is just this relentless series of traumas. The family's money disappears, leaving them poor and hated by everyone. This all leads to one horrific night when their estate is burned to the ground by an angry mob. In all that chaos, her little brother is killed, and her mother, who was already fragile, just shatters completely. She's lost to a madness that will haunt Antoinette for the rest of her life. This line, man, it's spoken by Antoinette's only childhood friend, Tia, and it just cuts right to the heart of her situation. The entire social order has been turned upside down. For a girl like Antoinette, there is no identity left to cling to. This quote just spells it out with brutal honesty. During the fire at her home, Antoinette sees Tia, her only friend, and runs towards her, probably just looking for some comfort. But instead, Tia throws a jagged rock right at her head. That moment is just devastating. It symbolizes the absolute impossibility of connection in her fractured world. The scar it leaves is both physical and emotional, and she carries it forever. So after a childhood like that, Antoinette is pushed into an arranged marriage that's supposed to be her salvation. But as we're about to see, it ends up being the final act of her destruction. Rhys brilliantly never gives the husband a name. We just assume he's Rochester from Jane Eyre. And this is a powerful choice. To Antoinette, he's not an individual. He is the embodiment of English colonial power. He comes to her home and finds it all too much, too wild, too colorful, too alive. He is basically repulsed by everything that makes her who she is. The marriage is pretty much poisoned from the start. Her resentful half-brother sends letters to the husband, filling his head with rumors about the family's history of mental instability. And the husband, who is already prejudiced and doesn't love her, just seizes on these stories as the perfect excuse to despise her. Antoinette. This is her real name. It represents her entire identity, her connection to her island, her passions, her history. Antoinette is the person she was actually born to be. And then there's this, Bertha. This is the name he forces on her. It was her mother's name, a name now tied to madness. By renaming her, he is literally erasing Antoinette and stamping a new identity onto her. He is trying to make her into someone else, someone he can control, someone he can label as mad. But Christophine, her fiercely loyal nurse,
the only real mother figure she's ever had, she sees right through his act. She confronts him with the cold, hard truth. This was never about love or sanity. It was about power and money. He married Antoinette for her inheritance, and now he wants to break her spirit because he can't stand that he can't control it.
So the final acts of betrayal are just swift and total. He uses the law to take control of her entire fortune. He humiliates her by sleeping with a servant girl in their own home. And then the ultimate cruelty. He rips her away from the Caribbean, the only place she's ever belonged, and drags her to England to lock her in a cold, gray attic.
Okay, so this is an incredibly tragic story. But why does this retelling matter so much? Well, because Rhys uses Antoinette's personal story to explore these massive, powerful forces that honestly still shape our world today. See, Antoinette isn't just the victim of a single bad husband. She's crushed by the combined weight of colonialism, which tells her she's inferior, patriarchy, which gives her husband absolute legal power over her, and finally, the complete and total destruction of her personal identity. It's a perfect storm. This quote from her time in the attic is just heartbreaking. They've taken all the mirrors away, so she literally can't see her own reflection. But on a deeper level, she's been stripped of every other reflection of herself. Her name, her home, her memories. She genuinely has no idea who she is anymore. And here, we've come full circle. The vibrant, complex Antoinette Cosway has been successfully erased and replaced by the one-dimensional monster, Bertha Mason. Her husband has manufactured the madwoman he needed her to be, all to justify his cruelty and control. But her story doesn't end with her as just a passive victim. In a final, fiery dream, Antoinette sees a red sky that holds all her memories of home, of the Caribbean. And this vision gives her a purpose. The fire she's about to set isn't just an act of madness. It's a final, desperate act to reclaim her own story and burn down the world that imprisoned her. Jean Rhys gave a voice to one of literature's most famous ghosts. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other so-called monsters, villains, and silent characters are out there, just waiting in the margins of our favorite stories, waiting for someone to finally tell their truth?